Okay, good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the 2020 Virtual GEO Symposium and of course the session Co-Designing Capacity Development. We are excited to present some of the GEO highlights on capacity development, and what we intend to do during this session is sharing and discussing with you how GEO flagships, initiatives, activities, and regional GEOs develop and implement that CD programs, and how they co-design and apply different capacity development strategies, tools, and methodologies. To start, please let me share with you my screen, and I want to give a short introduction on the session. So to start with, my name is Joost Teube. I work for ITC, Faculty of Geoinformation Science and Earth Observation, University of Twente, but I am seconded for 1 day a week to the GEO Secretariat to coordinate the working group capacity development. Long-standing experience in international project management and very well involved in all kinds of projects related to strengthening the capacities of individuals and organizations. Nancy Serby will join me during this session, and she's one of the working group co-chairs, and she will be responsible for moderating your Slido questions. I will come back to that. She's also the chair of the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, and then the working group on capacity building and data democracy. Okay, now this was the less important one. It is just the introduction, myself and Nancy Serby, who will moderate the Slido questions. Let me briefly go through the session. We have 5 presentations showing how the different GEO programs support the strengthening of the capacities and capabilities of the GEO community. And they represent a GEO flagship, that is GEOGLAM. It presents a GEO initiative, Blue Planet, a regional GEO, Every GEO, and a development agency, GIZ, as well as one participating organization, ECMOD, who is involved in one of the NASA Sophia programs. So hopefully these presentations will inspire you in the process of co-developing and or further improving your capacity development efforts. Before we start with the presentations, let me shortly introduce you the working group on capacity development we have within the GEO Secretariat. Recently we had a call, and we are very happy that 53 members of GEO were willing to contribute to this working group. The idea is to facilitate the GEO's efforts on capacity development by collecting and sharing best practices, developing capacity development strategies, tools, and methodologies, organizing dissemination events like webinars or trainings or site events during the normal GEO symposia, and offering tools for monitoring, evaluation, and impact assessments. So hopefully we can be of support to the whole GEO community. The other thing I would like to share with you is that the GEO Program Board has endorsed the overall approach on capacity development, which has 3 main principles. One is co-creation. And what we mean by that is that we try to leverage existing capacities based on a needs assessment. It also should have an holistic approach, that we not only focus on training of individuals, but also on strengthening the capacities and capabilities of organizations and the surrounding ecosystems. And finally, of course, we are looking for impact. It should be impact oriented, not only looking at the outputs, what have we done, but also on what we have achieved in terms of concrete results. So please contact the working group if you have anything to add to support to this approach. Some logistics. You can use Slido for your questions, please use the event code GEO. Select then session 08, that is the capacity development session, and your questions will be moderated during the live session. The Slido channel will remain open for 48 hours after the session, and this gives us time, the presenters mainly, to respond to the remaining questions within 7 days. So, after this short introduction, it's time to introduce the first presenters of this session, and that are Andy Nelson and Elisa Whitcraft, and they are both co-leads of the Capacity Development Working Group of the GEO flagship GEOGLAM, and they will present the GEOGLAM strategy and efforts on capacity development. So please present this video.
Development in GEOGLAM, strategies, activities, impacts, and lessons learned is part of the session on co-designing capacity development. My name is Andy Nelson. I'm a professor at ITC, University of Twente, and capacity development co-lead within GEOGLAM.
My name is Elisa Whitcraft. I'm from the University of Maryland and the GEOGLAM Secretariat, and I am also the co-lead on capacity development for GEOGLAM. To refresh all of your memory quickly, GEOGLAM principally has a G20 mandate. It came out in 2011 as a part of their action plan on food price volatility in markets, but they've updated it over the recent years to include not just using Earth observations for markets, but also to include food security. And in the process, we're also trying to strengthen our linkages to both national and global policy frameworks, including those that are the GEO Big Three and their priorities moving forward. The GEOGLAM really at its heart is a best practices and standards collecting organization. And what I want to highlight there is it's about standards collecting and pulling together the best practices. It's not about mandating. So it's very much not top down. It's very much bottom up. And we do our best to kind of represent the best of what we have to do and kind of unifying a vision, but we really don't try to prescribe what our partners must do. That passes over also to the way we're approaching capacity development. We established our CapDev team in 2019. We had several years of capacity development kind of in each of the individual projects that comprise GEOGLAM, but it really took us up until kind of 2018, 2019 to realize what our role really was and to get organized and get members in a critical mass into this team. The members are active in both capacity development and stakeholder engagement, and we try and include people who are not just kind of acting on that, but also the people who have traditionally been recipients of that so that we can kind of get their perspectives and enriching our systems as well. We have a couple of key activities and priorities that we're focusing on in this early phase. We're really working on developing our strategic vision for capacity development for GEOGLAM, which I think is going to be a lot of what we discussed today. We're documenting and promoting good practices around capacity development, and we'll share some of the lessons that we've learned thus far that we're pulling together. But we're also kind of trying to promote a community research and operationalization agenda and working through the whole kind of research to operations cycle. And so we're focused not just on, individual capacity development, but also kind of organizational change and the full life cycle of these sort of strategic relationships we develop. And then lastly, we serve as sort of a liaising body with the other CapDev for Earth observations organizations such as NCOS and GEO and beyond, so that we can really represent what it is that the GEOGLAM community sees as our top priorities.
Within GEOGLAM, in the CapDev team, we have some guiding principles that really describe our way of working and describe the values in what we would try to promote within the community. And what we recognize throughout of this is that it's really a co-development process. It's something that's also long-term, and we really want to start all of our work with clearly user-defined needs. And we recognize that this has to be clearly articulated by individuals and organizations, and it's really important that we identify some of the factors that drive the individual organizational behavior. And these kind of motives and incentives are really specific to a particular societal setting, and it's very important that these are incorporated into a theory of change for any capacity development intervention we do. We also recognize the need for an adaptable approach that responds to user needs. This can be an experimental approach, it can be incremental, And it's all part of the co-development and co-creation process that we have. And that really means long-term relationships. These things take time to be developed. It's not just about training, but there can be mentoring and coaching roles in that too. And finally, acknowledging that training is only one part of the program. Here we talk about conventional skills enhancement, that's fine, but also we want to look at broader systemic challenges of adopting Earth observations into workflows. And that requires a much more comprehensive capacity development program than you would get simply from training. As we recognized all of these ways of working and practices, we determined that our community and the people we work with would benefit from a guidance document. And this is something that we're working on right now with our team, and it aims to collect all of the community knowledge that we have and all the practice that we've done ourselves and all the experiences and all the narratives and stories that we've found from working with partners and trying to put them into a comprehensive document that's really going to help us, but our partners, to take this best practice and use it in future implementations and really describe how we do this kind of work in GEOGLAM. So it's a resource, and it's part of our ambitions to scale up agricultural monitoring activities and the associated capacity development activities that go with that. It's a mixture of theory, our definitions and our principles that we've just talked about, developing a theory of change, the approaches we have to co-design, and then examples of really good practice and stories from case studies across GEOGLAM. So we're going to start talking about some of those stories in the next few slides, and hopefully give you a flavor of how these have actually led to impact and why we think our way of working with capacity development is quite effective. Before we dig into those stories, these are just 4 text boxes here with some of the key messages that I think we'd like to talk about today. And I think Alyssa will jump in here a bit as we for these 4 keywords. And they'll come back throughout the slides. Trust is one, complementarity is another one. And Alyssa, maybe you've got a few words to say about the other 2 boxes here too.
Yeah, so of course the other 2 you can read plainly are stewardship. What do we do at the end of a project? A lot of GEO activities are comprised of individually funded projects. How do we ensure that we can continue to benefit from them after their grant cycle or after their project lifetime has been completed? And stewardship is really the key word there. And then we're going to really show the ways in which the regional and global groups that comprise GEO and GEOGLAM have been critical to the success of capacity development interventions that we've had so far.
Yep, great. So the first example is going to take us over to Southeast Asia. And here, I think the key message here is the ability to convene and bring together end users into regional and global EO networks. And so this is an example of Asia Rice community and GeoRice, one of the projects associated with Asia Rice. And this is really driven by the need in South and Southeast Asia for a community of partners across multiple countries in the region to develop a monitoring system for rice production, by far and away the most important crop in the region. And what this community has done over the years is taken this transition from research to operation and scaled it up so that all of the partners in this network are able to rapidly uptake and own SARB-based rice monitoring technology. And the example is shown here, and you can see there are very many logos representing all the partners, but some of those working together on a system under the GeoRice project to identify, in this particular example, a decrease in winter-spring rice harvested as compared to the previous year. But the real story is here, it's kind of a regional story about how you develop a community of practice, bring them into a network, and make sure that the Earth observation technology that's available is embedded within the network and within the partners. Another example from the region of Southeast Asia is Cropwatch. And this is an operational monitoring system that's been running for a number of years, but has now taken the next step of putting the system onto the cloud. And here, this allows a much greater involvement in kind of co-design, because that cloud-based system also includes functionality for APIs. So this means that in this case, an existing system in Thailand called AgriMap could have a very simple API call to the Cropwatch monitoring system, so that all of the information in Cropwatch, all of the data that's been processed and all the indicators could be seamlessly integrated into the Thai AgriMap system in a really transparent way. So the message here is about complementing existing systems or augmenting them So it's immediately embedded in their operational monitoring system. So there's a very, very low bar to get over in terms of learning, and there's very little change, but you're simply strengthening an existing system and making sure that what you do is complementary and fitting the user needs. Another example here is the Sen2Agri system, which exploits Sentinel-2 data for local to national agricultural monitoring. And I think this is a great example of a project that followed many of the steps that we talk about in our theory and practice of very strong user engagement from the very beginning to develop the algorithms and the specifications that were needed, then going into a whole co-design process and co-development to produce a scalable solution that delivers these Sentinel-2 based products to a number of users, and demonstrating that it can be suitable for national to local scale monitoring. But then one of the challenges then is to ensure that these systems Sen2Agri live beyond the project life. So getting those research activities operational and making sure that there's stewardship of all the knowledge that's been developed over time. And this is where the next step took place, where the Sen2Agri system has now been incorporated into the GEO Knowledge Hub. And it's kind of a proof of concept for the GEO Knowledge Hub. Because the idea is that the community anticipates that if we can curate a lot of the intellectual capital through the Knowledge Hub platform, it's a bit of a one-stop shop for institutions to look, who are looking to implement operational systems themselves. So it's broad deployment, it's transferability, and it's stewardship of the system and the associated training material that goes with it.
I'm going to talk about two stories. You may have seen this. It's popped up over the years in a couple of GEOGLAM impact story slides. In some, there was a severe drought in Argentina, and this was in 2018. The Ministry of Agriculture needed to declare a state of emergency to support farmers, but didn't know how to do so with great spatial precision and at this scale. INTA, which is the National Technology Research Center for Agriculture, utilized a variety of systems that they've developed over the years through participation in GEOGLAM, and moved physically offices into the Ministry of Agriculture to co-develop this system that really precisely responded to their need. You can go to the next slide. One of the systems that underpinned that was the Gland System. This was developed maybe 15 years ago in partnership between NASA, USDA, and the University of Maryland. And it's been used operationally, including by INTA in the previous example. The system was a little out of date, and so we received funding from NASA to update the system, refined it based on the user feedback of the people who were actually using it. Thank you to CONAB in Brazil and INTA in Argentina in particular. And we completely redesigned the system to make it more accessible and easier to use. AMA is the regional network of GEOGLAM in the Americas, and we came together on a call to talk about COVID impacts, and decided to show this interface just as our tool in case it was useful to anybody on the call. The head of estimations for the Bolsa de Cereales, which is an independent estimating organization within Argentina, saw it, then came into contact with group members from the AMA team. They had an informal chat over WhatsApp, showed him how to use the tool, he tweeted it out, and next thing we know, one of the most important news outlets in Argentina, La Nación, published about how this NASA data basically kind of raised the alert about these drought conditions that are taking place yet again north of Argentina. And so what this highlights is A, the value of the regional networks, B, the fact that we maintained a system in over many years and improved it. We were the stewards of this system, and we designed it intentionally to be low cost in terms of redeploying it and updating it in the future. And then we also really kind of, not every capacity development and kind of tech transfer activity has to be super formal. This was via telecon and via WhatsApp and via Twitter, and look at the result. Next slide, please. Similarly, I think probably a lot of you have seen this. This is the case in Uganda of them using satellite data to have kind of proactive response to food shortages. They were able to see kind of more synoptically and earlier in the season that crops weren't going to recover, and then the government was able to kind of institute these relief programs for farmers. This quote here is from Martin Awar, who is the permanent secretary in the commissioner of the Office of the Prime Minister in Uganda. He won the SDG award last year, right, from GEO. And, this really shows how important it is to sort of have a champion in an organization with whom you have a trust relationship. Go to the next slide. Because ultimately what that enables is this relationship between Dr. Catherine Akalembe and Mark O'War and the Prime Minister's office when there was an unrelated emergency, severe landslides in a portion of the country. They weren't exactly sure how to respond to it, but they were able to sort of reap what they sowed in terms of the relationships that they had built and fostered in the region. And so when this landslide happened, they turned to Catherine, and Catherine was able to activate the Copernicus EMS system and leverage that big GEO network that we have in order to kind of respond to this disaster and hopefully build a more resilient system in the future.
So I'd just like to finish off with these 4 messages, going back to the key words we mentioned at the beginning of the talk. Successful relationships, as part of the lessons that we've learned, are built on trust and ongoing communication based on this user-defined need. This is essential to the way we work. The interventions that are designed within GEOGLAM should complement and not replace or threaten existing services in an end-user organization.
And similarly, if you've created a really impactful and useful project, it makes sense to see if you can transition it to a new system or a new set of users. But in order to do that, you have to maintain it. It has to work. It has to be resilient to changes in technology and needs. And then finally, demonstrating the need and the value of bringing the end users into the global and regional GEO groups really kind of helps those systems and those organizations be resilient to institutional turnover for one, and secondarily helps ensure that people have access to the sort of cutting edge stuff that GEO is producing.
Great, thanks for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Andy and Alisa, for this informative presentation. I have the feeling that some terminology will come back in the other presentations as well. If we talk about co-design, co-development, having activities based on user needs. So probably these terms will come back in other presentations and maybe even in the questions. So please, all of you who are listening, if you have any questions, share it on Slido, and we will respond to that when we come to the Q&A session at the end. The next presentation is by Sophie Seyev. She's co-chair of the Blue Planet Initiative and will explain how this initiative approaches capacity development through different working groups and by applying a number of tools and methodologies. Please start this presentation.
Afternoon. I will be talking about capacity development approaches in GEO Blue Planet and also across the broader ocean observing community. So I'm Sophie Seyev. I'm the CEO of the Partnership for Observation of the Global Ocean, which is one of the participating organizations in GEO. And I'm also one of the 3 co-chairs of the GEO Blue Planet initiative. So there are 2 working groups within GEO Blue Planet that are relevant to this session. The first one is specifically called the Capacity Development Working Group. And one of the outputs from this working group has been the publication of a paper on challenges for global ocean observation, the need for increased human capacity, which was published as part of a GEO Blue Planet special issue. And it was co-led by Goose, another participating organisation in GEO, and POGO. And I'd also like to highlight a couple of initiatives from the community that are relevant here. One of them is the Ocean Best Practices initiative, which is currently conducting a survey of capacity development related to ocean best practices. And the other is a prospectus that is being developed as part of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which kicks off next year. And this is trying to outline the capacity development needs in terms of human resources, infrastructure, and the science policy interface, with the ultimate goal of coordinating existing initiatives and obtaining and coordinating funding in a centralized way for new initiatives to address the gaps. So the second working group is on stakeholder engagement and societal awareness. And the work of this group has been conducted partly through a series of stakeholder engagement workshops which are focused mainly on small island developing states. And these have been really to evaluate the information requirements and how these requirements can be met by existing data and information products, but also to identify and address gaps where such products and information aren't readily available. So Ocean Communicators United is a contributor to this working group, and it's a grouping of science communication experts from a number of international, regional, as well as national oceanographic organizations. And it provides a forum for its members to share information, expertise, and best practices related to science communication through a series of webinars on specific topics related to ocean science communication, and also through publication of best practices such as the one shown here, which was on writing a communication strategy. This group has also been asked by the UN Decade leadership to contribute to the communication strategy for the decade and to the communication efforts of the decade. So Blue Planet has produced several brochures highlighting the societal benefits of ocean and coastal observations, and has also contributed to a white paper on the role of stakeholders in creating societal value from coastal and ocean observations. And we have also been asked to contribute to a GIS-based web catalogue of case studies on the socio-economic benefits of ocean and coastal observations and forecasts and so on. And this is being funded by US IUS. We also work very much on the co-development of decision support tools, which I'll come back to a bit later on in the presentation. So another product from GEO Blue Planet in terms of societal awareness has been the creation of a web portal which seeks to clarify this complex, what we call Oceanscape of ocean and coastal organizations and all the acronyms that go with them, and really tries to identify the relationships between these organizations and also where relationships don't exist and new ones could be created. So in terms of the broader scope of GEO Blue Planet, we're working on this value cycle from the identification of information needs through to the development of decision support tools to inform knowledge and inform decision makers. So what we often find is that data providers expect the users to have very specific and clear requirements in terms of their data needs, in terms of the geographical coverage, resolution, and also data visualization. But in fact, the reality is that users very often don't know specifically what they require. They just know what decisions they need to make, and they want to know from us if ocean observations and data can help them. So some of the questions that we often get from these stakeholder workshops are things like, how accurate are the satellite products in their region? Where can they find data? Which products should they use? And how can they download and use these data? So we're very much following the GEO Knowledge Hub concept in terms of developing knowledge hubs for ocean information. And we've started with a pilot one for Sargassum, which is a seaweed that accumulates and often gathers on beaches, and there's a particular problem for countries in the Caribbean in terms of the impact on their tourism. And we're also developing concepts for knowledge hubs for fisheries and for SDG Target 14.1. This is just a screenshot of the Sargassum Information Hub that's currently being developed. And on the SDG front, Blue Planet has been contributing and working very closely with UN Environment to to help with the methodologies for the eutrophication part of SDG Indicator 14.1.1 and contributed to this publication of a global manual on ocean statistics, which actually led to that indicator being upgraded from Tier 3 to Tier 2. We've also been asked by UN Environment to contribute and to lead the publication of an inventory of existing marine litter databases and the development of a concept for a global monitoring platform for marine litter. And this is in the final stages of publication, and the concept is already being taken up by IBM to develop such a platform, focusing initially on citizen science data on marine litter. So some of the decision support tools that are being developed by GeoBlue Planet in partnership with other organizations, some of which are shown on the bottom here. So one is to develop an oil spill monitoring service for the wider Caribbean. And this will provide publicly available monitoring and forecasting system for oil spills. And we'll also have a training component for regional satellite analysts who will be responsible for performing the oil spill surveillance. And a specific user, which is a regional action center in the Caribbean, has already been identified as the primary user of this service. And so this is obviously being very much co-developed with this particular user. And AmeriGeo will host the Oil Spill Information Toolkit for this service. So finally, just another example of a decision support tool being developed is this WaveForce. It's designed to address the issue that forecasts for sandy shorelines aren't applicable to reef-lined coasts, and so this service is being developed for wave-driven flood forecasting of reef-lined coasts, and it's a partnership between NOAA, STAR, USGS, and Deltares under the auspices of GeoBlue Planet. I think this is my final slide, so thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions in writing or during the symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. It's nice to see another example of a flagship or initiative having specific working groups on capacity development. And I really would like to encourage the GEO community, the other flagships and initiatives, and even the community activities to also consider the establishment of a working group capacity development. This will make it easier to share all kinds of tools and methodologies among the different groups. Okay, thank you so far, Sophie. And questions, please put them on Slido. The next presentation is by Dr. Rajesh Bahadur Thapa, and he leads the capacity development program of the Safir Hindu Kush Himalaya program and will present the achievements so far. He's also actively engaged in the AO GEO, the regional GEO. So please go ahead with the presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending my presentation on capacity development approach for utilizing Earth observation data in Hindu Kush Himalayan region. I am Rajesh Bahadur Thapa, working at ECMOD as a remote sensing and geoinformation specialist. I lead capacity development program of Surveyor HKS initiative. ECMOD is an intergovernmental knowledge and learning center that develops and shares research, information, and innovation to empower people in the 8 regional member countries of the Hindu Kush Himalaya, including Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan. ECMOD is a participating organization of GEO and actively promoting Himalayan GEO, the task number 9 of AOGEO. With the core spirit of GEO, as we are empowering people to use emerging Earth observation data and geospatial technology for making evidence-based decisions to protect the pulse of the planet. Hindu Kush Himalayan region represents the most diverse area covering the highest mountain range in the world, where combining Earth observation data with the emerging geospatial information technology help accessing the remote region and offer feasible ways to address the regional critical data and information gap. We identified a serious capacity gap and shortfall of professionals and trained specialists working in Earth observation and GIT field. Although the significant role of gender in the development of gender-responsive policy agendas and decisions is well recognized, the involvement of women in the Earth observation and GIT field is lacking. The progressive development of the technology demands continuous support by building capacity through education, training, and developing more professionals and specialists. For this purpose, a strategic framework is required to meet the challenges of providing a well-trained workforce while also encouraging those trained professionals to apply such knowledge in their workplace and society in general. In this context, the Soribir HKH initiative at DC mode is working on bridging these gaps and try to tap the opportunities for connecting space to village, closely aligning with Himalayan geo activities. As strategic and systematic capacity building pathways that effectively strengthen the capacity of individuals and institutions in the region is a prerequisite, in this presentation I would like to share the capacity building approach, impact pathways, and application designed to empower decision makers and relevant practitioners by providing them with geospatial data, tools, products, and services in order to act locally on climatic sensitive issues such as disaster, agriculture, food security, water, land use, and ecosystems in Hindu Kush Himalayan region. The process of capacity building is iterative that involves the design, application, knowledge, and modification. Based on the situation analysis of Hindu Kush Himalayan region and the lesson learned, the ADIM approach was developed, which is presented in the left figure. It consists of 4 elements of capacity building represented by each letter of ADIM, where A meant for assessment, D for design, I for implementation, and M for monitoring and evaluation. The figure in the right shows the capacity building pathways guided by approach. Let me elaborate these 4 elements of ADIM. The ADIM approach starts with the need assessment. Assessments of individual as well as institutional capacities were conducted in multiple consultation workshops in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal to identify gaps, needs, and priorities, and the current capacities in each country. These gaps and needs were subsequently grouped into 4 major thematic areas of survey, that is agriculture and food security, land use, land cover and ecosystem, water resource and hydroclimatic disaster, and weather and climate services. This assessment process played a significant role in promoting active user engagement, ongoing partnership, and identifying the areas of more engagement, along with serving as an input for our capacity development pathways. After the assessment process, the approach moves to design process, where we closely work with thematic subject matter experts to design the curriculum based on the training proposal that incorporate learning objectives, expected outcomes, target audience, and daily agenda. Development of various theory and practical materials, including training modules, manuals, reading materials, hands-on exercise, and PPTs, were considered at this step. To strengthen the individual and institutional capacity at national and regional level, we identified 4 major types of capacity building activities, including on-the-job training, standard training, training of trainers, and exposure learning. The on-the-job training and the training of trainers were considered as institutional capacity building activities, and the other 2 were considered as individual capacity building activities. The implementation part of ADIM approach refers to the execution of the capacity building designs according to the 4 major types of activities that I have discussed already. So the participants were grouped into 3 categories as policy and decision makers, technical professionals, and youth, as they need different type of trainings. Various national and regional level activities were implemented by joint collaboration with local institutes of partner countries. The participants' selection was based on either nomination process, open call process, or both. Specific training targeting the youth or early career professional and women-oriented training were also organized to improve gender balance and increase women participants. The 4th element of ADM approach is monitoring and evaluation that help us to improve performance, achieve better results, ensure quality and relevance of capacity building efforts. The structured pre- and post-assessment tools were developed and used for each type of capacity building activity, except for the exposure learning type, in order to monitor a participant's expectation, his or her progress in understanding the content, and to get feedback for continuous improvement. The figure presents impact pathway of capacity building result framework following the ADM approach. Mapping the impact of capacity building activities is a key indicator of successful implementation. In the map, capacity built in both individual as well as institutional landscapes is highlighted. When the enhanced capacity used by the individual or institutions, there will be a great impact on various paths such as innovation, work efficiency, effectiveness, practices, and quality, which will ultimately bring transformative change to performance and service delivery and push forward to scale out or scale up of capacity building activity in the region. In this slide, the table shows a result of capacity building needs and priorities from country consultation workshop conducted during 2015 and 16. Although 4 country consultation workshops, 1 for each country, including Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Pakistan, were conducted for identifying gaps, needs, priorities, and the capabilities of organizations, communities, and individuals. Participants from the relevant organization, universities, research institute, bilateral and multilateral organizations were attended these workshops. As shown in the table, different capacity building needs and priorities were identified. Some of them were common for multiple countries, while some fit to a single country. So the needs and priorities were categorized by 4 thematic areas of survey, including agriculture and food security, water resource and hydroclimatic disaster, land use, land cover and ecosystem, and weather and climate service. In addition, cross-cutting areas of capacity building intersecting the all thematic areas or multiple thematic areas were also identified. This slide presents the capacity building activities design results, which includes content, type of capacity building activity, and materials during the survey year 2015 to 18. During the period, we developed 5 modules for agriculture and food security thematic area, 6 modules for water resource and hydroclimatic disaster thematic area, 6 for land use, land cover and ecosystem thematic area, 1 for weather and climatic service thematic area, and 8 for cross-cutting thematic areas. Most of the modules were supported by PPT, hands-on tutorials. In addition, some activity were also supported by comprehensive book and manuals. Here the table and the representative photographs presents the capacity building activity implementation. In the last 3 years, we organized 39 capacity building events covering different thematic areas and served thousands of participants from 213 unique institutions where we were able to maintain 35% of women participants. This slide shows an overview of the capacity building activity implementation results by type in the left table and by country in the right table. Most of the training events were standard training, which serves higher number of people and institutions comparing to other type of activities. And interesting figures on women participation in different capacity building activities, such as 34% participants in standard training and 44% for exposure learning can be observed. The countrywide data shows that There were participants from all regional member countries of ECMOD and the other continents. It also provides which country needs more effort to bring more women in capacity building activity, such as Nepal achieved 50% of women participation in capacity building activities, while the number of women participants is nearly 13% in Afghanistan. Pre and post assessment of each type of capacity building activity except for exposure learning visit. The pre-assessment provides guidelines about the participants' awareness and expectation about the capacity building content, while the post-assessment provides the level of knowledge acquisition by the participants and feedback for the purpose of improvement. In this presentation, a standard training served for mapping of forest degradation and deforestation, one of the 39 capacity building activities, is selected as a representative of pre- and post-assessment monitoring and evaluation result. The figure shows that participants' gender structure, level of experience on remote sensing techniques, awareness of remote sensing and GIS-related software, and level of experience on the use of SAR data and GIS application. This provides an opportunity to the resource persons for revisiting their materials during the training and delivery. Continuing to the previous slide, this table shows the post-assessment result. It includes participants' response to the technical capacity building support, which ranges from content presentation, interaction from the resource person, and expectation fulfillment of the participants, and the quality of other logistical supports. The table also highlights whether their capacity increased or not due to this activity. This kind of information really helps us to build our confidence and identify the areas of weakness for improving other capacity building activities and the service further. In conclusion, the ADM approach is simple and was able to cater the needs in the region. The approach identified gaps and needs, designed efficient capacity building activities, implemented the plans to achieve impact, and monitoring the delivery result. Our approach promoted gender, adopted frontier technology, engaged subject matter expert, and provided sustainable solution focused on partners' priorities. This should strengthen the ability of government and development stakeholders in the region to sustain the program. The on-the-job training and training of trainers type of capacity building activities played a very important role in institutional capacity building. The standard type of activities were powerful in building individual capacity and improving the gender balance in the technical professional workforce. The exposure learning visit brought young people together and provided a competitive environment of learning wherein they gain and share knowledge among themselves and others. Despite the challenges, the approach was able to provide capacity building services to large number of unique organizations and communities worldwide. This work reveals several opportunities that arise from capacity building activities, from socio-cultural experiential learning to the use of frontier technology. In addition, our effort in the region helped promoting the Himalayan GEO activities in capacity strengthening to utilize the Earth observation data. As a way forward, I would like to mention that regular organizational capacity assessment and tracer surveys are necessary to monitor the periodic impact of the capacity building efforts with feedback mechanism for effective capacity building delivery, as needs and priorities often change over time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tapa. I observed that you separate capacity development on individual level and on institutional level, and hopefully when it comes to the Q&A, we can elaborate a little bit further on the distinction between the two. The next presentation is by Anastasia Rahome. She's the Science and Data Lead at RCMRD and will explain RCMRD's involvement in the AfriGeo, the Severe Eastern and Southern Program, the involvement in GEOGLAM, and the CEO's Working Group on Capacity Development and Data Democracy. Please present this video.
Hi everyone, I'm going to present on tools and approaches for positive capacity development outcomes. My name is Anastasia Rahome. I'm the Science and Data Lead for Savia Eastern and Southern Africa at the Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development, RCMRD. Savia Eastern and Southern Africa aims at improving use of Earth observation data for informed decision making, improving the capacity of technical experts and other stakeholders through needs-based development of tailor-made tools and applications and capacity building. We also aim at creating awareness about the value of Earth observation, tools and services. Now, I'm going to give this presentation based on the following outline. I'll look at scope and perspectives. I also look at samples, that is sample approaches and methods, tools and activities, and extended outcomes. And I will also give 2 case studies, how we have applied capacity building using those tools and approaches. Now, looking at the scope, the first one is, of course, within our AfriGeo region. One of the objectives of AfriGeo is effective use of Earth observations for responding to societal challenges and addressing sustainable development issues for GEO members and participating organizations. That means increasing technical and human capacity. We have RCMRD, whose core function and one of its strategic results is training and capacity building in geoinformation and basic information technology. And Savia Eastern and Southern Africa, whose intermediate results too is improving capacity of analysts and decision makers to use Earth observation information and geospatial information technologies. Also, I'll be looking at the GEO flagships, in this case GEOGLAM, which we have worked with extensively in the recent past. And it also looks at capacity development, mainly looking at best practices and regional network coordination. And I've also looked at the CEO's working group on capacity building and data democracy. They also have a function of providing capacity, education and training through virtual trainings and workshops, and we've had a chance to work with them also within the Africa region. Now, when you look at perspectives of co-designing, in this session we are talking about co-designing of capacity development. What comes to mind? It's creating, developing and implementing with stakeholders. It has to be the whole process, that's starting from needs identification, design, implementation, as well as monitoring, evaluation and learning. And this ensures that the results meet the needs and are reusable. Now, co-designing has different aspects. There's the issue of working with the stakeholders and the users. There's the issue of sharing and learning, because not everybody knows everything. You need to collaborate with other institutions. No single institution at all times will have everything that's required. Sometimes you need to create partnerships so that we are able to offer this capacity building in an effective way. And some of those partnerships, sometimes we realize that they need to last, meaning that we need to do agreements such as MOU to ensure commitment and sustainability. And also co-funding. When you look at these partnerships, some of them, it's not just in the actual offering of the training, but offering the resources that are very much required for the training. So this is not exhaustive, but these are some of the issues that come into play when you look at co-designing of capacity building activities. Now, we've been talking about co-designing means that whoever is offering the training and the person who is being trained need to be working together. These are our users, and we need to engage them. Why? Because we need to understand their training needs. What are the skills and knowledge gaps do they have? What are the existing efforts that exist within their areas of work or within themselves that are, maybe they are receiving other trainings that are addressing the same identified needs? How do we ensure that the efforts that we are going to put in place for those trainings are effective and non-repetitive? Because we do not want to duplicate efforts and waste funds and resources. And also, after we'll be able to identify specific gaps and opportunities to those needs. For example, participants might know how to use remote sensing maybe to monitor forest cover. But you know that when you're monitoring forest, there is, for example, an aspect of biomass estimation. Maybe that's what they are lacking. How do we zero in on those specific gaps and opportunities? Now, many of the training participants that we work with, they come from institutions. And these institutions, based on their on whatever they have, how they do their business, could be either limiting or enhancing the use of the training that these participants acquire. So doing capacity assessments for institutions is something else that we've also seen as a very important and critical element in terms of user engagement. And this helps us to assess the level of competency for the institutions, understand the relevance of geospatial data and the training that you're offering into their decision-making processes to make sure that it's more effective. How is it going to be sustainable, for example? And how do we appropriately target the skills building? Is it at the regional level, national or subnational level? And are there opportunities, for example, to ensure that these institutions can continue to get this capacity maybe from local universities or other training institutions by developing new curriculum or improving the one that's already existing? And also being able to look at what are the appropriate or the most preferred methods of training. We've seen some prefer co-development, others training of trainers, because maybe the staff that need to get the skills are many, the resources are not enough, so train a few and they go and train others. Or is it on-job training? Something is already ongoing, but you acquire the skills as the job continues. And also, there are different, the trainings could be targeted to different types of users. Some are technical, others are decision makers. The language or the content could be different based on who the audience is. And also the issue of languages. There are some, at some points, who require translation, and this is also an important aspect, considering, for example, within Africa, we have English speaking and French, and a few countries that have Portuguese as their national languages. Now, looking at the sample approaches that we have used within the Africa region, looking at needs assessment, Survey Eastern and Southern Africa in the year 2016 conducted needs assessment for various thematic groups. This was in form of workshops. We did follow-up user engagements and consultations, and we were able to identify training needs within various institutions and stakeholders. And RCMRD also does needs assessment within its member countries, which are 20 of them within the Eastern and Southern African region. When you design together and develop a service, for example, for training, one of the documents that we use is called a training definition document. And it has details about a particular training, be it project-based. For example, there's a project that's happening and people need to be trained on the tools that have been developed. Exactly what is going to be trained, what are the resources that are required, who are the participants, and what are the requisites that they need to have. And by doing this together with the users, we're able to be more effective and ensure that their new skills and knowledge is acquired, but also operationalized. That is to be actively used within the institution. And also monitoring, evaluation, and learning. We don't just want to train, but before we train, we do assessments on what the participants have already, because we don't want to repeat. And also what is it that they expect, so that whatever training that's being given is targeted at specific expected outcomes. And also in terms of institutional capacity assessments, this gives a baseline that a post-training survey can evaluate whether there was a change from what was there before. And this also helps us to do targeted follow-up trainings, knowing exactly where the skills and knowledge that we imparted earlier are being used and how we can improve what is already happening. Now, we have another approach, mentorship, and these are some of the activities we have under these are Space Challenge, boot camps, and hackathons. Now, these ones, other than offering new skills and knowledge to the participants, they also increase awareness on the use and the value of Earth observation data, as well as give motivation and guidance to the participants. And another aspect is partnerships and collaborations. You realize, like I said, no institution is has everything in terms of knowledge, the skills, the resources, and sometimes it's important to create synergies and add value. And some of the tools are data sharing agreements and MOUs, and these ones help to ensure that these partnerships and collaborations last and are sustainable. Now I'll go into the case studies, and the first one is the regional and the national crop monitors. This one is a flagship of GEO, through the GEOGLAM flagship. And within the East Africa region, we have the University of Maryland that had already started developing national crop monitors for Tanzania and Uganda. And partnering with NASA Harvest and RCMRD, the Ministry of Agriculture in Kenya, and ICPAC, which works within the IGAD region, we were able to design and do a joint training and implementation for IGAD countries' technical representatives. And thereafter, together with ICPAC, co-developed the first regional crop monitor for the IGAD region. And this crop monitor is not only operational at the moment, but it's being disseminated at the quarterly Greater Horn of Africa Climate Outlook Forum. Now, the GACOF previously was just doing climate outlooks, but has since then incorporated an agricultural outlook, and the regional crop monitor is one of the tools that's being used. And at the national level, we have Kenya that came on board and is currently producing a national crop monitor every month. And this has helped the ministry to even be able to look at food security outlooks, especially even at this time of the COVID-19, when food security has become such a critical issue. And we also have Rwanda, which is in the process of operationalization. We have offered capacity building to them. And what we usually do with the two countries, what we've done with the two countries, Kenya and Rwanda, is not just give training to the technical experts who do these, who develop the crop monitors, but also do what we call a co-development. So we co-develop the crop monitors together after offering the basic training, so that by the time they're operationalizing the bulletins, they are doing it themselves. And this has proved to be a very effective way, and we are happy to say that Ethiopia is also looking forward to do their national crop monitor. Now, I'll also look at the mentorships, and the reason why I decided on this is because this is one area that probably not many people are doing, but I think giving motivation to young minds and people who are not very well aware of the value of Earth observation data has shown that it's not because they can't do it, it's because sometimes they do not know. So recently we participated as RCMRD and AfriGeo in the Kampala Inspire Hackathon that was, it was held virtually after the COVID-19 situation. And the key topics were agriculture, environmental sustainability, and others. And what we did was to mentor one of the projects that was looking at the desert locust monitoring, and we assisted them on how they can access the Earth observation data, how to use it. And we're happy to report that the group that was being mentored by RCMRD won the challenge. RCMRD Space Challenge has been going on for the last 2 years. It's done by RCMRD together with Savia Eastern and Southern Africa. What we do is mentor primary and secondary school students in the use of geospatial data and tools, and they are supposed to collect data within their schools, weather data, and do basic mapping, and their projects are supposed to be beneficial to their communities. And we also train teachers on basics of GIS and Earth observation so that they're able to guide the children as they develop their projects. Then they come for the challenge and do a competition. And one of the most positive outcomes is one of the schools in Mombasa, which is a malaria-prone area, were able to design a project where they monitor different types of mosquito larvae. And this has helped the community there and the institution that will deal with malaria control to design better measures for controlling the spread of mosquitoes. And the other one is the Y side, that's Women in Science Girls Team Camp. We participated as part of NASA, and this one is targeted to girls in high school, where they come together and learn new skills, as well as get motivation and guidance on use of Earth observation data by NASA, as well as other technologies. And some of the partners there are Gallup and U.S. Department of State Office of Global Partnerships, and you have private companies such as Intel, Google, Millennium Challenge Corporation, and Microsoft. So these are areas where we've seen good outreach, creation of awareness, and opportunity for growth, especially for the high school kids and the girls. So I hope that's what I have for today, and we are looking forward to even improve and get better in our co-designing of training activities and ensuring that not only skills are improved, but whatever skills are acquired are put into proper use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anastasia. I think it was a very interesting presentation, and you really showed that capacity development can take place on different levels. And you also showed that you work with different target groups. So I think it was a very nice example of how broad capacity development really can be. So thank you for that. The final presentation is by Hannah Albrecht. She is the Capacity Development Advisor for the GIZ project, Soil Protection, Combating Desertification and Sustainable Land Management. And in the next video, she will explain what the GIZ approach to capacity development is. So please go ahead with the video.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. During this session of Co-Designing Capacity Development, I would like to talk about why capacity development is important, why it means more than trainings, and present the perspective from the development sector. My name is Hannah Albrecht, and I'm working for the German Development Corporation GIZ, based in Bonn, Germany. Before my current position, I was based in different countries in Eastern Africa, mainly Ethiopia and Rwanda, working with our partner institutions on topics around integrated water resources management and landscape restoration. In April this year, I joined the sector project on soil protection, combating desertification, and sustainable land management, in which I am mainly responsible for the implementation of its capacity development strategy. In order to link our activities with those of the international community, I joined the GEO working group on capacity development as recently as last month. In the following couple of minutes, I would like to talk about the topic why capacity development is so crucial, why it is more than trainings, and which concepts have proven successful. I will talk about projects dealing with Earth observation issues of GIZ and the development sector. And finally, I would like to present the sectoral project I am currently working for as Officer for Capacity Development. The importance of capacity development. What are we talking about? At GIZ, capacity development is about strengthening partners and tapping potentials. It is the key to sustainable development. Why are we talking about it? Capacity development has been one of the core themes of the development discourse for several decades. The close link between capacity development and aid effectiveness was repeatedly underlined in the Paris Declaration of 2005 and the Accra Agenda for Action in 2008. Since then, the development community has stepped up the international debate on capacity development and ways to support it. How can we go about it? GIZ has recently put all the knowledge and experience of decades of work in capacity building into a concept called Capacity Works. In the following, the 5 success factors are presented. They deal with the topics of strategy, cooperation, steering structure, processes, and learning and innovation. Traditional approaches such as the transfer of knowledge and expertise through long-term consultancy inputs and training measures are now seen as just one possible source of leverage. More and more often, these are coming in for criticism. Simultaneously, more recent forms of support, such as triangular and South-South cooperation, are becoming the focus of attention. The political and social framework plays a crucial role in ensuring reforms are effective and sustainable. Without an enabling environment, changes remain superficial and have no real impact in the medium term. This all calls for capacities and experience in a wide variety of areas: health, legal affairs, public finance, communications, organizational development, education and training, and of course Earth observations. But that in itself is not enough. Long-term impact can only be achieved if all activities and strategies are efficiently coordinated and stakeholders in all sectors are effectively consulted. If a country is to take charge of its own destiny in the long term, it must be able to organize complex processes and foster an enabling environment without external assistance. This involves developing the capacities of individuals, organizations, and social institutions. As you can see here on this map, you will find GIZ projects dealing with Earth observation topics almost all over the world. Presenting these would be highly interesting, but would take us probably days or even weeks. Due to the limited time available, I will not go into detail about specific examples, but rather I would like to point out the high importance Earth observations has for the development sector. All too often, we come across situations like this, an example from Ethiopia, from which step by step, of course with the help of capacity development, we hope to achieve results like these. I let the photos speak for themselves and continue. Last but not least, I would like to present very briefly the project I'm working for. Its name is as short and concise as Project on Soil Protection, Desertification and Sustainable Land Management. We advise the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development on all soil-related matters and work closely with the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. The Agenda 2030 is of great significance to our work, especially SDG 15.3 on land degradation neutrality. LDN supports countries worldwide in setting up and monitoring national LDN targets to avoid, reduce, and reverse land degradation. It aims for a balance of no net land loss. In addition, the Economics of Land Degradation Initiative, ELD, which is working at the Science Policy Interface, makes part of our project. It was initiated in 2012 by the European Commission, the UNCCD, and the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Its vision and goal is to transform global understanding of the value of land and create awareness of the economic case for sustainable land management that prevents loss of natural capital, secures livelihoods, preserves ecosystem services, combats climate change, and addresses food, energy, and water security and to create capacity for the utilization of economic information for sustainable land management. For the latter, I would like to briefly mention our ELD campus, an essential part of our capacity development strategy. I invite you to visit it following the link below and hereby close my presentation. Thanks a lot for listening, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and to learning more from each other. And finally, I hope we will achieve the goal of a needs-oriented, holistic and impact-driven approach to capacity development within the group on Earth observations. Please feel free to write me an email in case of any remarks, comments, questions or suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, for this presentation. Very informative on the approach for GIZ when it comes to capacity development. I invite the presenters to activate your videos to have the Q&A session. There are several questions that came in. As you see that we wanted to present different approaches to capacity development from a flagship perspective, from an initiative, from a participating organization. This also means that time for questions is limited, so I would like to invite the presenters to give a short response to some of the questions. I was triggered again by one of the something that mentioned Rajesh about having individual or institutional capacity development, and maybe you can shortly explain us what is the difference between an individual capacity development activity and an institutional capacity development activity.
Thank you, George. It's a really good questions that we differentiate that the individual and institutional capacity development is mostly the institutional capacity development is we work with a partner agency in Hindu Kush Himalayan region in different countries for particular service. For instance, if we're talking about land cover service, then we work with the Department of Forest or the Land Use Land Cover related department that working in this country. And then to improve their capacity to use this land use land cover map or to create land use land cover map or even further bringing them to the other capacity building, transfer the knowledge to the other agency. So that is we call institutional capacity development. That also include the partner institutions from university. So we train the university professor, and then these university professor can transfer the knowledge to the university student, as well as they can also serve as an advisor or the supervisor for their maybe the respective department in their country. So that is a institutional capacity development. And then for individual, there are some requests from individual. For example, we are focusing on empowering women in GIT. We focus the younger women bring into GIT and Earth observation related field, so that we have very specific training program, so that can make them aware what are the Earth observation technologies are available and how they can use those technology in their research or in their study or in their work. So those kind of things are the individual capacity development, I can say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
A question for Alisa. You mentioned stewardship as critical to maintain knowledge after individual projects end. Can you elaborate what GEOGLAM provides for this?
Yeah, sure. You can hear me, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay, before I got too carried away. I started to elaborate an answer in the text box, although the characters were quite limited. So what we mean by it is essentially that when projects end, since GEOGLAM is principally composed of 3 to 5 year funded projects from a variety of granting organizations, just like I think many of the activities in GEO are, When those projects end, if they've developed something really useful and wonderful, that, we don't lose access to that sort of intellectual advancement or the training materials associated with it after that project lifetime ends. So one way we've approached it in the Americas initiative, for example, we built up a resource hub that if you go to agamericas.org and click resources, it takes you there. We're still populating it with info, but that has everything from map products to publications to white papers to training data sets to kind of everything in between, with the idea being that, we've created a repository for these things to at least be accessible online. But there needs to be sort of a step back from that to really enrich it. And we think that at the closeout of projects, at the end of those grant cycles, there should either be some sort of low cost or no cost extension for the project executors to remain available to the GEO community as they seek to reuse tools, or they spend some time at the closeout of their project coming up with sort of a long-term transition or stewardship plan that maybe GEO or a group like GEOGLAM takes over. So they would spend explaining their training documents, making sure they're, kind of usable by people who are not principally involved in the project during its lifetime. Just essentially trying to prevent the loss of this intellectual capital that's developed and the investments that are made in the project lifetime. So the forum is one example. It's designed to speak to the GEO Knowledge Hub. Once that's set up, it doesn't do it yet. The AmeriGeo platform, and I'm not even sure if the DAB, the data access broker from GEO, is still a part of the plan. But the idea is there is an API in it so that it can kind of be queried from other knowledge hubs and systems and repositories.
Okay, thank you. Time is running. Maybe a question for Anastasia. I really like those perspectives on co-designing. There is a question, when it comes to the co-design of capacity development activities, how do you select the stakeholders and the number of stakeholders to ensure that you have an acceptable target group representation? So who do you involve when it comes to the whole co-design process, and how do you select them?
Okay, thank you for the question. First of all, like I said in the presentation, we usually do a needs assessment for the services so that we are able to identify the training needs. And that needs assessment is part of it involves what we call stakeholder mapping. And what we do in stakeholder mapping is to look at the list of the stakeholders we have or the interested parties in terms of a certain training, look at what their roles are, and how also using the pre-survey, the pre-training survey, we are also able to assess what is it that they expect in terms of outcomes, or how do they expect to use the training for their decision-making processes. So using those approaches, we are able to prioritize who to include in a particular training. And sometimes we also have to look at who are the stakeholders, for example, government institutions, whose role pertains to the particular training that we are offering. And in terms of the numbers, it's a very tricky affair because sometimes we are limited by the resources that are available. So we have sometimes to limit the numbers, and also the trainers, because you don't want to over engage the trainers to a point where they are not able to offer a good one-on-one session, for example, if it's a workshop. And one of the things probably, if I can mention, that we have had a challenge with is in terms of balancing gender, because when you give criteria and prerequisites for a certain training, for example, you might find that they are not the gender balance already is not met, not the way we would expect. But usually we look at the roles that stakeholders play and how they are going to use a particular training that you are offering. so that even when they get the skills and knowledge, they are able to apply. And also our post-training survey, we are able to look at what they've done with it. That also gives us an indication for any follow-up trainings, so that the ones, if we are giving a follow-up training to an initial training that was there, then we give priority to those who are already applying the skills and knowledge that we already gave. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. There is another question, and I'm not sure who will take that one. It says, first of all, that GEO is very happy that we, since last November, we have the first Pacific Island member within the GEO community. But the question is, what thought has been given to help promote capacity development, especially in this region? So my question maybe to some of you, or not all of you, so what are you doing when it comes to capacity development in that specific region? I saw from EasyMod that you had some participants from Papua New Guinea, but that's the only thing I thought. Is there anybody who has involvement in that specific region, the Pacific Island region?
We do not in GEOGLAM. Andy, you're muted, but would you like to address this question?
Yeah, I just realized I have two mute buttons in different places. One was off, one was on. I was about to step in. Thanks, Elisa. Now, I don't think we're not quite there yet with GEOGLAM in terms of the Asia Pacific region, but the way we're set up, with our regional network coordinators, which automatically become part of our executive committee, is that if we see that there's a growing need there, that's a regional group that we could set up and help coordinate, because we can add those regions as they become active and as the demands become clear. And that structure that we have with our executive committee and these regional network coordinators means that we can help with the regional priorities in agricultural monitoring, the needs and the gap assessment that you were just talking about, some of the tools you need to assess the stakeholders, identifying funding opportunities to get things built up. So we're not there yet, but we have the structure to bring them in. We're a broad organization and would welcome new members in new regions to establish a new regional hub.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And of course, we also have the overall GEO working group on capacity development, and I really invite you, the one who was making the question, to see if you can link up with that working group as well. That brings me to another question: that can others join the GEO working group on capacity development? Very briefly, I can mention that the call has been announced already some time ago, and we have 53 members. But of course, if new people are willing to contribute to this working group, they are most welcome. There is a question on the linkage between, I still take 1 minute because the previous session also took 2 more minutes. So I have one final question, and that is the linkage between the GEOS, the system of system, and the link with GEOS and the flagships or the different projects. Is there anybody who can comment on that? How the linkage, does it exist, and in which way? So the question is, how central is training and building capacity of the GEOS in the flagships projects, and how much is used of Earth observation in general?
If Sophie or Anastasia or somebody else wants to speak up who hasn't had a chance yet, please go ahead. But if not, I can comment a little bit.
Yeah, or Sophie.
Okay, Sophie, if you want to interject, please do. I will just say that for us, capacity development, because a lot of the work we do is very applied, it's kind of taken a point of every project that's been a component of GEOGLAM's constituent activities since its onset. But the whole reason we kind of set up this capacity development team was to try and do it in a more effective, efficient, and kind of longer lasting way, guided by principles that we in the community have learned work. and kind of avoiding those that don't. So it's a very big question that's hard to answer quickly, but training and knowledge transfer are a huge part of any application's work, especially when we're working internationally. And so, yeah, this group is really about kind of making it more effective.
Okay.
If I can just add something, please.
Yes, of course.
Well, I would say I think when you look at the use of Earth observations and mainly look at within Africa and mainly within our Severe Eastern and Southern Africa project, we've based our thematic areas mainly on the geos. That's how we have the 4 thematic areas. I think Rajesh also mentioned the 4 of them: agriculture and food security, water and related disasters, weather and climate, and land use, land cover change, and mapping. And one of our intermediate results in Severe is actually improving the capacity of our stakeholders in order to be able to use Earth observations so that whatever decision-making processes that they do is well informed. So capacity building is actually, I would say, a core function of the Severe Eastern and Southern Africa, and as well as RCMRD institutionally, where we serve our 20 member countries. One of the core mandates of RCMRD is capacity building, and we also align our services to the GEOs. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are really running out of time, so I would like to thank all the presenters for their contribution, and of course all listeners, and hopefully the presentations were useful for you to think about the way you address capacity development. So thank you all for your contribution. I have an announcement to make that tomorrow is the 4th day of the symposium, and we will start at 1 p.m. Central European Standard Time, with 2 sessions. One is on talking about the regional geos, and the second one is on covering water and coastal data sets. So by this, I would like to end this session, and again, thanks to you all.
Thank you.
And bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.